Ladies and gentlemen, at last year's economic summit, SCAG's team of economists revealed the number of people living in poverty rose by 69% between 1990 and 2012, nearly 3 times the population growth during that period. And to put that in context, 3.2 million people and 1 in 4 children in the region now live in poverty. That news shocked many in the audience, including Lucy Dunn, the president and CEO of the Orange County Business Council, pledged to work with SCAG's Global Land Use and Economics Council on addressing the issue. In August, SCAG and the Southern California Leadership Council convened the 50 Years into the War on Poverty Summit to commemorate the anniversary of President Lyndon Baines Johnson's signing of the Economic Opportunity Act and serve as a region-wide forum on the issue of growing poverty in the region. The event featured a broad cross-section of individuals working to address poverty, including educators, workforce development folks, leaders from our nonprofit sector, as well as those representing the business sector. Several solutions were proposed at that summit, which led to the development of a regional action plan on poverty. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome now to tell us more about the plan Hassan Akrada, the Executive Director of the Southern California Association of Governments, be implementing the policies of the 83-member Regional Council, as well as overseeing the day-to-day operations of this agency. Hassan Akrada.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning to all of you. I know this panel is between you and lunch, but bear with us. To my leadership at SCAG and to our partner at Southern California Leadership Council, this is the 5th year we have this economic conference. And as I told our regional council the first year, that we needed to do this for Southern California for a reason that's very clear. There is a great connection between what we do and economic development. And I also told them that I would not be interested in doing another summit just for the sake of doing summits. So I'm going to review with you today a couple of things that happened in the last few years. And one of them is when our economists got together in 2010 and told us about the severe recession that we're in. We lost 1 million jobs. A lot of people were losing hope. And we held this summit and we said we need to do something. And when I say we, government, private, non-profit, working together. And we've shown that the power of collaboration is absolutely essential to doing anything. 170 cities from our members in Southern California developed a resolution for being a business-friendly city. We developed the regional transportation plan, which was approved with no objection. A plan that represents an area of 39,000 square miles, 18.4 million people, 190 cities, and 6 counties. A plan that has $525 billion of investment over the next 30 years. And the message was clear. Let us move these infrastructure projects to create jobs faster. Governor Davis this morning mentioned something that's critical. That to do a major infrastructure project in Southern California takes an average of 17 years. Our economists that you just heard from estimated that if we reduce that by 5 years, we would put that much money into the economy. We would create hundreds and thousands of jobs in the SCAG region. The bottom line is we held this conference, we talked about economic strategies, and we said, so what's missing? Last year, born from these very sobering statistics, 1 in 15 Americans in poverty, 1 in 4 children in poverty. The number went up from 1.9 million in 1990 to 3.3 million in 2010. We all said government, business, non-profit, let us do something about it. For the leaders of this region, when you look at these statistics, you will have to feel something. You have to feel some responsibility for making sure that these numbers change in the future. And so we said, okay, let us get together and talk about it. And again, we looked for our economists to offer assistance. Where can we go to create jobs, to lift people out of poverty, to create economic opportunities? And that is the sectors here that are listed that do not require a bachelor's degree. That if you have a high school or some skills, you could find a job. We brought together last summer 500 people from all sectors. And we had a discussion. And we had Governor Davis and other speakers outline what can we do to help people in poverty. Now, I want to mention that there's a lot of great organizations that do some work. And we are not saying that this is to put their work aside. What we're talking about here, creating economic opportunities. We have the Global Land Use and Economic Council, led by the chair, Greg McWilliam. And I want to thank Greg for his effort and give him a hand. When we sat down and we told the Global Land Use and Economic Council, develop an action plan, a plan for action. So today in this conference, in this 5th annual economic conference we have, become the action plan of how we move forward to either eliminate or reduce poverty in a great way. And we outline short-term and long-term strategies. The short-term strategies first. And that's what you're going to hear later today from the panelists. We need to utilize the adopted Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy to be the major job creation engine. We need to update Southern California economic and job creation strategy and rely on the economists and their analysis. And third, we need to undertake serious regulatory reforms. I think Senator De Leon, and I'm grateful that he came and spoke to you, mentioned that we need to balance the world of environment and economy. We agree. We can't ignore either side. But for a major infrastructure project to take 17 years in California is not acceptable. And oftentimes the challenges and the reason this takes so long is reason that I don't think anybody would agree with in this room. We support the fact that CEQA exists. When I visit other countries in the world, I would appreciate that we have CEQA. But I do not and will not support the abuses of CEQA that takes place every single day. Recently with Mr. Bill Allen, my friend Bill Allen from LAADC, we authored an op-ed piece about a very specific job-creating measure in Palmdale. And that was challenged because the argument violates CEQA. It's about a plan that builds rail cars. I mean, that's a classic example of abuse of CEQA. And we were not going to stop talking about, and I hope my leader would agree with me, that we support CEQA, but the abuse of CEQA will not support and has no place in our economic recovery. So part of the short-term strategy, we're going to talk to Senator De Leon, other representatives of this region, to talk serious reform so we can move this project faster and create jobs faster. There is obviously a bigger picture strategy. The strategy focuses on education, K-1 through 14, adult education reform, and training to maintain workers. This morning I was on the radio, people ask, well, why is it that we don't have the kind of income that the Bay Area has? You hear the statistics. And household income in the Bay Area is $80,325. Household average income in Southern California is $59,000. 43% of the population in the Bay Area have bachelor's degree or better. 28% or 29% in Southern California. There's a correlation here. And our strategy should focus in, are we creating enough or all the opportunities needed for our kids to be ready for the future economy? Is the jobs that we created, the million jobs that the economists talked about, that are low-paying jobs, is there an opportunity for it to move? Is there an opportunity for people to have hope that there is upward social mobility? That's what this discussion is all about, and the long-term strategy should be. I want to conclude by reminding all of us of what started this discussion. 50 years ago, last August, President Johnson said the following: unfortunately, many Americans live on the outskirts of hope. Our task is to help replace their despair with opportunity. This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. I urge this Congress and all Americans to join me with this effort. And I urge all of you not to wait another 50 years to talk about this issue. I urge all of you leaders from the public sector, private sector, non-profit, to remember that for a great nation like ours, to have 1 in 4 kids in a region like ours live in poverty is not acceptable. So let us get the recovery going. Thank you very much.
Hassan, thank you very, very much. We're going to dive deeper now into the Regional Action Plan on Poverty. And here to help us, 3 distinguished panelists, including Hassan Akrada, your very own executive director, of course, heading up the Southern California Association of Governments, appointed in January. More than 25 years of public and private sector experience, in case you didn't know, in transportation planning in Southern California. At SCAG, he implements the policies of the Regional Council and directs day-to-day operations of the agency. David Rattray, also with us, overseeing the Education and Workforce Development Department of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and Unite LA, the School to Career Partnership of Los Angeles. Mr. Rattray, who participated in the recent LAEDC economic event, officially joined the Chamber in 2003 after being a strategic partner for several years, and since '98 he's led Unite LA in building business and educational partnerships toward a goal of improving the academic achievement and enthusiasm for learning for all Los Angeles students. Also joining us today is Nolan Rollins, the President and CEO of the Los Angeles Urban League. The Los Angeles Urban League advances equal opportunities on behalf of African Americans and other minority youth and adults through innovative job training, job placement, youth achievement, and business development programs. Under Mr. Rollins' leadership, the LA Urban League has developed successful programs in the areas of workforce development, early childhood education, and neighborhood transportation and transformation models in health, housing, safety, education, as well as employment. And our third guest is Paul Granillo, the President and CEO of the Inland Empire Economic Partnership, which is focused on addressing current deficits in human capital, transportation infrastructure, educational attainment, and environmental quality. He works closely with businesses and government leaders, many of you here in the audience, to make the Inland Empire a great place to live, work, and invest. Please welcome our esteemed panelists for this discussion now. Hassan, of course, we saw your action steps proposals. Let me ask David Rattray, right out of the box here, your suggestions to address the issues that were just presented in Hassan's presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon. So first of all, I would just commend SCAG and all the partners. I think they've come up with a really exciting and thoughtful regional action plan on poverty. It has I think a good mix of the big strategic things that really could cause breakthroughs and have a long view, but also it embeds its work in moving trains, as we might call them, that are really underway right now that we can leverage and take advantage of. So as you see there, we've talked about a regional jobs blueprint, and I don't need to tell most of you, we have sort of an outdated system here between the number of cities and counties and school districts and community college districts and workforce investment boards that don't really have an incentive to do coordinated planning. In fact, they have terrific incentives not to do coordinated planning and disincentives to do coordinated planning. And I think it's really up to all of us, and we tried to put this in this plan, to say as leaders we need to rise above those incentives and disincentives and make sure that we do have a regional jobs blueprint. And then we looked inside of the possibilities of driving some of these factors with the reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act, now called the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act. It calls for a regional plan for workforce. So it gives us an opportunity to use something that we otherwise would be expected to do, should do, as a driver, to do this kind of work on a regional basis. We also have $500 million. I'm sure most of you know about it, but if you don't, I hope you find out about it, that we're in the last two budgets, $250 million last year and $250 million this year, to help underwrite these consortia and build career pathways out of poverty, pathways to success. So we see that as a huge opportunity, and one that's a moving train that we all can leverage and propel down the highway. And last but not least, adult ed. Most of you, again, hopefully know, but if you don't, AB 86 really challenged us to reinvent adult education and address the question brought up a couple times here about 40% of our older adults who do not have a high school education, and how we need to reinvent the way we've delivered adult ed and be smarter and more efficient about it. And those consortia are putting plans together as we speak and presenting them to the state. And that's a huge opportunity for a lot of us to engage together with our K-12 and community college partners and many others and really reinvent adult ed in California. So I'll just stop there as three opportunities that I think are terrific in this plan.
Thank you very much, David Rattray. And Nolan Rollins with us, the president and CEO of the Urban League. And of course, you and your predecessor, John Mack, been lifting people out of poverty in this area for many, many years. Give us your view on these recommendations and your view of things out here at the moment.
Thank you. First, let me also thank SCAG for the work that they're doing and GLUE for the work, certainly of putting this together. I guess I would simply start here. Poverty is an economic condition. Poverty will not be solved by a paternalistic view. Poverty will not be solved by altruism. Poverty will not be solved by pity, which means that any poverty reduction initiative that we're going to look at is going to have to use an economic lens in order to get it done. And if we're going to use an economic lens, then we're going to have to pull apart what that economic lens looks like. So I think any strategy is going to have to be really clear about how we pull apart the economic lens, and we'll just do it quickly because I know that we want to continue going. But if we're going to pull apart the economic lens, it's what's going to make our country a better country. We have to do it in a way that we understand what our self-interest is. The poverty rates that we have in our city and our county and our country right now are not in the self-interest of America, not in the self-interest of Los Angeles, not in the self-interest of the economy of California. So if we can all agree that it's not in our self-interest, then we have to go to what are the specific problems that are there that are creating the challenges for people who are actually in poverty. We know that there are educational challenges, so there has got to be a distinct and very clear commitment to education. We know that there are opportunity challenges when it comes to workforce development, so what we have to do is be really clear about how we pull apart the workforce opportunities and match those who are actually in need of those opportunities with those who are the demand drivers who are also in need. Again, it's a self-interest argument that exists that we've got to be really clear about. So that's the opportunity side. The other side is the business side, making sure that we create a city, a state, and a nation that is business friendly. I do not separate business from employment because businesses employ individuals. These are the people that we serve every single day. If we're going to have a real conversation about poverty, again, it's an economic conversation that we must be having. The next for me is ensuring that we're understanding the health ramifications. There is a great line that moves between the health of individuals and their state of being in poverty, in terms of access to health, in terms of being able to have preventative care, in terms of being able to have access to fresh food items, becomes critically important. And then I would also simply say is that, again, we've got to look at individuals as a resource. Our country always does better when we know better. There were many years ago where we would just discard something that is now seen as of value, plastic. There were many years ago where we would just discard something that we did not think was of value, renewable waste. So as we begin to know better and understand the better economic indicators that are there and understanding how interconnected we are, we will start looking at individuals as a resource as opposed to something that should be discarded. If we don't do this, our economy is going to continue to be destabilized and we will never reach the equilibrium that we're looking for.
Mr. Rollins, thank you. Has the Urban League also released specific recommendations that this group can take a look at?
Absolutely. So what we've released is an opportunity compact. We fundamentally believe that if we are going to as a collective, if we're going to create a real space, it has to be very clear and direct. And the Opportunity Compact is really some of the things that I've just talked about. It's opportunities to thrive in education for children. It's opportunities to earn in the area of workforce and job development and understanding how you match those things. It's opportunities to own in the housing industry and ensuring that we're actually creating what we heard a little earlier about the proper type of housing for individuals. And then it's also the opportunity to prosper, which is around economic development and business development. So we are really looking forward to continue to work with GLUE and continue to work with SCAG on this work because we think that there is great synergy around us sitting in the room, both the public sector, the private sector, and the not-for-profit, and saying, let's figure out the economic way out of the challenge that we're in right now without having to have this be about emotion, but having it be very transactional about how we get out of the challenges that we're in.
Let's bring in Paul Granillo now into the discussion, the President and CEO of the Inland Empire Economic Partnership. Give us your thoughts on how the private and public sectors can better work together to deal with the poverty issue here.
I want to start by thanking Hassan and SCAG for taking leadership on this issue. It's almost lunch, and you can get bored easily, and you can forget what this is about. So I hate sports analogies, but Hassan said you're elected officials, so it's okay, all right? I'm a big Notre Dame fan, all right? My team, my team lost, okay? But something else happened on Saturday. I've gone to that game 5 or 6 times. But you know, what time was the game? The game was at noon. The game wasn't in prime time because both teams' records were horrible. And there's better teams. And they got the prime time spot. So you as our elected officials have to understand that this issue is about us no longer being in prime time. You can say whatever you want about California, and I've lived here, my family's lived here for over 100 years. But this is about the future. And the people elected you to lead. And on these issues, as you look at this map, and you look at these fixes that are being suggested, construction. What are you going to do about CEQA? Are you really going to go up there to Sacramento and argue for it? Or if you don't like it, are you going to go run against the person who's sitting there? Because if not, our economy's not going to get better. Logistics, and with all due respect to my friend Dr. Wallerstein here present, the EPA, CARB, the AQMD have put a bullseye on a #1 growth sector. And what are we going to do about that as it affects this issue of jobs and ultimately poverty? Finance, insurance, real estate, again, CEQA. Manufacturing, 700,000 jobs created in the United States, only 7,000 in Southern California. Why is that? There are issues of over-regulation. Healthcare, unless we can get this workforce training piece correct, we're not going to be able to take advantage of those. And those are all issues that you need to be involved in. If you don't, we're never going to be in prime time again. So please, if nothing else, take this very, very seriously. Because in 50 years ago, we were just the United States coming off the World War, and we still had a poverty problem, okay? But we were a damn strong, powerful economy. Now we compete in a world economy. And that makes the need to double down on trying to fix this issue even more important.
Thank you very much. And Hassan, one shocking thing you mentioned in your presentation, a big percentage of this region's future living in poverty here at the moment, a lot of kids, and one thing that might come as a surprise even in this area, for a while there, a very high percentage, and that still might be the case, of kids in the schools in this area are actually homeless, which is an absolute shock. Let's talk about that and how this group can address the kids living in poverty here.
Well, thank you, Frank, and I agree with a lot of what the panelists say. Not everything, but a lot of what the panelists say. David mentioned there were $250 million last year available for grants in California. We actually at SCAG worked with the applicants, and the good news is we received $139 million out of the $250 million here in California to be invested in our school education. And I want to thank these efforts and the efforts of all the people who got us to where we are. Look, there is no secret about the fact that the K-1 through 12 has significant challenges. One, it's hard to reform such a huge area just by saying we need to reform it. But I also want you to know I reside in San Bernardino County. And I know there is elected official, 2 supervisors here from San Bernardino, and a board member from the district that my daughter goes to. And when 85% of the people entering the community college need some help in math and English, that tells you that there is a fundamental issues of why these kids are not getting the education they need to succeed in the future. Some of that issue has to deal with the fact that, Frank, some of them live in poverty, some of them have difficult home, but a lot of them don't have hope. We have gone around the region, we hold several workshops before the Poverty Summit last year. And I was stricken by the fact that some of these kids needed hope. Look, it's easy to talk about how bad things are, but I do have hope. Today I want to introduce 2 young people here, Yang Shin Lu and Andrew Pusas. Stand up, please. These are 2 master students at UCLA. Sorry, USC fans. It so happened that I'm a senior fellow at UCLA, and I do get to work with those bright young kids. And when I interact with them, and when I go give a class at UCLA or USC, I get that hope that actually this generation gets it. But to Frank's point, how did they get here? And are we providing to the kids, the 1 in 4 kids in poverty, the same opportunities to get there? I want to make this statement, that in this great nation, if a kid wants to go to school, there is no reason whatsoever why they shouldn't go to school. And if we follow that philosophy, we know that a lot of kids that need encouragement, hope, but we need to pay attention to that 1 in 4 kids. You can't expect a kid living in poverty to do well in school. And that issue, I agree with Paul, this is not about just having a discussion. This is about having a discussion in prime time of what we're going to do about this. And Nolan is absolutely right. This is about economic opportunities, and economic opportunities don't happen in vacuums. And I want to repeat what Senator De Leon this morning said. He said pretty much to sum what he said, we need to find the balance between the environment and creating jobs. We are going to be behind in fighting this war on poverty if we don't find that balance. And we are going to rely on your leadership to move us through that.
Thank you very much, Hassan. And Paul Granillo, let me ask you this on the point that was brought up earlier regarding affordability and also raising the minimum wage here now being discussed statewide. What's your view of those proposals being floated now in Sacramento to raise not only the minimum wage here in this area, but statewide?
You know, I think we always have to be careful. Our economy is on the edge. We have the highest taxes. Pick your favorite tax. It's highest in California. And so the more pressure we continue to place on companies, that's going to become very difficult. And so I think it's a debate that has to be had. But it goes back to what Hassan said, what Senator De Leon said about balance. What I fear and what I see is that there isn't a lot of balance, because a lot of these ideas, they work well in places where people are doing well. San Francisco and the Silicon Valley, and those high wages equal high taxes and the ability to be more affordable than we find it here. And so we have to be very, very careful.
David Rattray, any thoughts on the minimum wage proposals that certainly are part of this discussion here today?
No.
Anything else?
I'm an education guy, Frank. I can't say anything about minimum wage. Well, I mean, to me, the way into it that sort of relates to my area, because I'm just bonkers about kids and youth, is when we power the education system and kids come out, youth, young adults come out well educated, they drive economic growth. That lifts all boats. And so I think we'd all rather see wages go up because of strength than wages go up because we have to do some force on the markets. And I guess I would just add then, if we take the long view and you step back from President Johnson's challenge to us, you think about us as a country, we're fighters. We're really good at fighting. And if we don't lay down our arms, we often fight to stalemates. And when it comes to poverty, I think we've had a lot of stalemates. We do blaming pretty well on education. I'm pretty used to it now. You'll hear the reformers blame the status quo blame the attackers. You'll hear unions blame the business community, or the business community blame the teacher unions. You'll hear the business community say that K-16 doesn't give them who they need. And we spend a lot of energy sort of beating each other up. What we learned through creating the LA Compact is if you actually create a round table and we say, why don't we all be all in on fighting poverty and building economic prosperity, the kind of talent that we have in Southern California, we can actually create gigantic breakthroughs. So I would see this as a call to action for us to stop spending so much energy on beating each other up and spend a lot more energy on inventing solutions, because we've got tons of solutions.
We're used to having news-driven discussions, of course, on the air. Nolan Rollins, give us your thoughts on these proposals to raise the minimum wage here in California.
So I am, certainly by virtue of the organization that I'm with, that we are in support of raising the minimum wage. But here's the challenge. You know, the conversation about minimum wage is too often had in a silo, because the minimum wage conversation is also about affordability. So if you're having a conversation about minimum wage, it tells you something about the affordability of the ecosystem that you're in right then and there. So if you know that the ecosystem is not affordable, we can't just be talking about wages and raising wages. We also have to be talking about those other things that increase the lack of affordability in those areas, whether it be housing, whether it be being able to purchase food, whether it be any of those things, go to school. We can't just do this on the back of one simple argument. And I think that what inevitably happens is there's a conversation about one thing. Let's focus on just minimum wage. There's a conversation about one thing. Let's focus on just raising tuition. Well, you know, these things wind up happening in a vacuum, not considering the other things that can be helpful to getting that done. So while we are absolutely in support of raising the minimum wage, we're also in support of making sure that the regulatory environment in California is right so that businesses in the marketplace can flourish. We don't believe that there's an ability to separate the things, because we think that that's when you start to retrench and go into kind of your corner. So I would just challenge us to think more critically about the whys and think more critically about about how we get ourselves out of this in one move, whether it be raising the tuition, whether it be raising the minimum wage, whether it be changing the regulatory environment. Just one of those is not going to strengthen the economy in and of itself. Doing all of those things plus more, those are going to be the things that we have to do. So I think rooms like this where you're bringing people together in this way to exchange ideas, we should take the very best of those things that can help the very most of the people who are in this city and in this community and in this state. And I think that's the real way to the future. This is a future that has got to be inclusive. It's a future that's got to be, how do we look at our own self-interest as people who are living here and building that self-interest?
Thank you very much, Nolan Rollins. And Paul Granillo, as we wind down this discussion, any other specific recommendations on how people can afford to live here and eat and maybe buy a few holiday presents this year?
That's an open-ended question. I have a 3-year-old, so go to Amazon. No, but I think, again, the issue, we have to do something about this issue. And it's going to require everyone to work together. In the Inland Empire, we have a lot of coming together around this issue because we've seen our poverty rate grow, the number of people in poverty grow by 500,000 since 1990. So 4.3 million residents, and right now 809,000 live in poverty. It's always in front of us. And so whether it's the Randall Lewis scholars working on healthcare, whether or not it's the Launch Initiative to try and move people into stabilized housing, get them educated, get them nationally certified, and get them a job, all of these things require time and effort, and I just urge you all to fight this fight. It has to be fought, and it has to be fought now.
We have some business and, of course, civic leader giants here in the audience. I was just informed that we are able to open it up for questions, as we've done in the past at this forum. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone over to you. Just want to acknowledge the home team for just a moment. Gary Tobin, the president and CEO of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. Great to see you here, along with, yes, Bill Allen from the LAEDC. Greg McWilliams, of course, from Newhall Land, and Dan Carney, Senior Vice President, CBS Radio here in Los Angeles. Great to see you here as well, Dan. Let's open it up here. Sometimes the first question is slow in coming, so is there a second question? And there is one right here. Please go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Marcia McLean. I'm Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Santa Clarita. And when Mr. De Leon was speaking up there, I just wanted to jump up and ask a question, and then I'd like to pose it to you as well. Most of us here in this room are from local governments, and we do a pretty good job in balancing our budgets and doing what we need to do for our residents. But we continuously get unfunded mandates. We get choked by Sacramento legislators with these unfunded mandates, and our taxpayers suffer for it, our local residents. So how do you help solve that problem?
Well, Council member, I think we could have a whole new conference about how we do things in California vis-a-vis mandates. And I do agree with you, we do sometimes unfunded mandates, and there's something we have to deal with. The SCAG have a couple of those laws that have to implement, and they're unfunded. Having said that, whether it's the state of California or every local city or every local county, we all have a stake in making sure that number of 1 in 4 children, the 3.3 million people, is either eliminated totally or reduced. And Nolan said it best. It's going to take all sides to sit together, like in this setting, to get this right. You know, you talk about minimum wage. You talk about regulation. Which one is better? So would the business sector say, for example, say, I'm willing to go for raising the minimum wage if you get rid of the cumbersome regulation that I have? Again, it's about the balance. I think Sacramento gets it, that unfunded mandate is going to end up hurting the locals. We don't like that. But back to the subject of how do we create economic opportunities to lift people up from poverty. And to do that, we need to work together at all levels, state, federal, local, and the unfunded mandate is just one element of that equation.
Thank you very much for your question. And we have another question in the audience. Yes, we do.
Lena Platt, Executive Intelligence Review and the LaRouche Political Action Committee. I wanted to ask about the BRICS. Maybe you know that there is more than 60% of the world's population has set up a new economic system in Brazil as of July 15th, led by Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And you've probably heard they're building big projects. A canal across Nicaragua, a new Suez Canal, high-speed rail from the Cape of Good Hope to Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. So my question is, since California is the gateway to the Pacific, and the leaders of this BRICS are China and India, if there's a discussion of how we can orient our economy and take advantage of this new massive development initiative by hooking into that, by getting the United States and California to join these nations in this new massive economic reconstruction of the world, including as a war avoidance policy.
Thank you for raising that interesting point. Paul, you want to take that for a moment?
Sure. I think obviously in the plan, the idea of investing in infrastructure is there. And going back to what the councilwoman was saying from Santa Clarita, half of California's population lives, south of Wilshire Boulevard, and yet the Senate Pro Tem said to you not an hour or two ago that the day of roads is over. Did you hear him? He said that, right? So that's fundamentally at odds with the strategy and what other nations are doing by investing in infrastructure projects that connect people, that build a stronger economy. So again, the need for your voice to be heard is key.
And Frank, let me give you an example that happened as a result of the discussion we had at this conference. A couple of years ago, I don't know, last year I think, LADC, Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, did a study with SCAG on the film industry. At the time we were saying, we need to keep the film industry here in the region. And I think LADC economists estimated that the return on investment is huge. It's like 1 in 11 to 1. Now, sometimes you ask your question, what does the film industry have to do with poverty? But the film industry being here is creating jobs to lift people out of poverty, and that's why the state of California did the tax credit recently. The governor signed it recently, and there is factual demonstration of why these kind of things work. Infrastructure investment work. Governor Davis said it. In the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, whether it's the Hoover Dam, the interstate system in the 50s, it worked. And I don't care what infrastructure is. I don't care whether it's a road or a train or a bicycle lane or whatever it is. Major infrastructure creates jobs. For regions to compete in the global economy, we need to maintain first our infrastructure, and we need to build on it. And if we look at other, like Paul said, other developing countries in the world, they are actually investing a lot of money. High-speed rail, I know it's not popular the way California is talking about it, but high-speed rail is billions of dollars getting invested in China and other countries. We need to invest in infrastructure before we say let us join other nations into this fight. I think we have the answers. We just need this discussion to elevate to the short-term and long-term plan that we outlined. Today you outline the action plan. Our job is to make sure we have this conversation together, not in silos, so it leads to something in the future.
Last question right over here, please. Oh. All right, we'll get to that one too then. Go right ahead.
I'm Margaret Clark, Mayor Pro Tem in the City of Rosemead. And at the Poverty Conference, I raised this question, and Hassan is probably saying, oh no, not again. But I really think that part of our strategy for the education is financial literacy. And President Clinton delivered a speech on November 10th to 5,000 at-risk children, 10 to 15 years old, and from at-risk communities. I love what he said. He said, if you want to be powerful, if you want to live your dream, if you want to get an education and make the most of it, you've got to know how to handle your money. The most important thing you can do right now is to do your job, which is to learn as much as you can in school. But one of the things that all of our schools have not done a very good job at is teaching young people about money, about the value of money, about how to save it, how to spend it, and how not to waste it. So I love that speech by our former president, and I hope that a lot of people will take up the cause. Thank you.
All right. Let's get that question in here, please.
Ala Ronan with the Annenberg Foundation, LA in Sync. I feel like one of the themes of today has been how do we balance, environmental regulations along with project development in creating a more forward-moving economy. And I know that there's this cap and trade money that's starting to come down over 2014 through 2020. And so I'm just wondering, do you feel like that's an attempt at balancing this? And also, how do we make it so that when that money comes into Southern California, there aren't these 17-year gaps between the project developments?
I was hoping to get through a meeting that I don't get asked about cap and trade money. But that was a hope. Look, cap and trade is here. This year, in the budget this year, $829 million statewide will be spent. And next few years will be in the billions of dollars. That's significant amount of money. And my hope, and I think fair to say our hope, is this money gets invested not in silos, but in a coordinated effort to build infrastructure to create the kind of economic opportunities we're talking about. I would tell you this, that this money has been spent many different ways already. I am very discouraged by the way we're approaching it as a state. It is so siloed right now, as frankly I can't figure out whether we're going to get somewhere or not. But I'm also certain that with the leadership we have, I know Gail Goldberg, who sits on the Strategic Growth Council, knows this very well, that this year is the first year. It's a difficult process. We're going to have to work through it. And my hope is, yes, this will be another funding source to invest in infrastructure that reduces greenhouse gas emission, but at the same time create economic opportunities. That's yet to be seen. A lot of work yet to be done to accomplish that. But it is a significant amount of money, and we're looking forward to working with the state agencies to make sure that happens. I want to tell you this, that SCAG developed the 2012 Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. It was by far probably the best thing we ever did. It is nationally and internationally recognized to be a cutting edge. We have the investment outline in the plan. That is part of our strategy to move people out of poverty. We don't need to go very far. Regions know what regions need. I think we look forward to working with the state to make sure we make that plan real. And that's the hope for the cap and trade funding. Thank you for the question.
We have one more question from the incoming president of this organization. Please go right ahead.
Training, sorry, small woman, big voice. I'm going to put on my private sector hat right now. I'm a banker. And one of the things that we look to do is create certainty. And one of the things that I think we need businesses to retain and attract businesses in California, we need to develop a climate of certainty. the 9,000-pound gorilla sitting in the room that I haven't heard. Now, I did leave to go to the ladies' room for a minute. So maybe someone talked about the California pension obligation that is set to bury us. And I'm wondering, how do we make that a priority? How do we get that on the table? Because I can tell you, businesses are not going to want to grow in California if they understand that their tax burden is going to be chewed up, become greater, because we have failed to address this monumental problem of public pensions.
It's a big issue. David Rattray likes to handle the big ones. David?
Yeah, that's
of course, we'll follow up on
me,
it this
Frank.
afternoon, of course.
Well, first of all, I don't think I have any sort of magical smart answer on that. I think I have a lot of respect for the governor who is saying you've got to make down payments. First of all, you can't just pretend like it isn't there. In last year's budget, he did make a serious attempt at a down payment on the teacher pension fund. It relates, I think, to the larger question that the pro tem brought up, which is building down that, or taking down that wall of debt that we sort of pretended like wasn't there and just built it up, actually. I guess I would just refer back to my area of expertise, which is really education. We have to power economic growth. And while I understand the point you're making about businesses will only invest where they see some certainty, I would also hope that businesses are going to invest where they have the human capital to power their own companies. And I think we have a great plan here that can help us think about how do we create the human capital that makes this the envy of the world in terms of the talent that we can bring to our employers.
Terrific. We're just about to start our working lunch, but first, an announcement from the current president of SCAG, Carl Morehouse. Please welcome back Councilman Carl Morehouse back to the podium, and please join me in thanking our panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Frank. And at this point, we are going to take a quick break while lunch is being served. This is a working lunch, so if you'd like to stretch your legs, we'll ask you please return to your seats promptly. We're going to try to stay. I know we've slipped already on the time. We're going to try to stay on the course and get back to our third and final panel in approximately 10 minutes. So grab your lunch, and we'll keep moving towards trying to get you out of here at a decent hour. Thank you.